Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I am so excited as I have one of the most amazing people who has just been incredible in my life, a huge mentor. And I, first of all, want to just welcome Teresa de Grosbois to my show. Welcome, Teresa.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me, Candy.
And wait till you hear about this powerhouse. As you all know, this is our space to bring those incredible thought leaders and powerhouses to the table to have the really rich, courageous, connected conversation around what it means to be a leader, how we choose to show up, how we choose to serve others, and how we choose to take responsibility in that space. So, as I said, I am so excited to have Teresa in the ring with me today. We're going to go a few rounds. It's going to get deep. It's going to get juicy. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But before I do that, let me tell you why this woman just, besides the fact that I just adore her, let me tell you why she's a rock star. Teresa is a 4 times international best-selling author. She's an international speaker sought by entrepreneurs and large corporations wanting to better understand how local word of mouth can subtly turn into epidemic. This woman is all about influence. She is amazing. Specializing in the topics of influence and success, Teresa has a proven track record in understanding word of mouth epidemics, having taken 3 books to bestseller status in only 8 months. Wow. Her book, Mass Influence, which I have read multiple times and is fabulous, hit #1 international bestseller status in North America and Europe on the same day it launched. Who does that? Teresa teaches business and marketing courses around the globe, including teaching courses to startup entrepreneurs in developing countries. As the chair of the Evolutionary Business Council, Teresa leads an international invitation-only council of speakers and influencers dedicated to teaching the principles of success. Teresa is also the co-founder of the Global Influence Summit. Like I said, this woman is an absolute rock star. But I'm curious, Teresa, tell us a little bit about how you got here and how you got to be this amazing influence on such a global scale.
Wow, I'm humbled by that introduction. Thank you. The first thing I have to say is, leadership is messy, and like anyone who's gotten anywhere in their life, it's been a messy journey. I'd love to tell you it was all beautiful and linear and it all made sense. And in hindsight, it makes sense. I came up through the oil and gas industry in Canada, and learned a lot of wonderful leadership skills in various leadership roles. And yet found that I was doing something I didn't really love, and I think my life significantly changed, and it was probably the start of things really taking off for me when I looked at the fact that I really wasn't all that happy with what I'd been doing, and I think a lot of us have a moment. For me, it happened in the middle of what I affectionately call my really bad year. It was about almost 15 years ago now, where, in the first 6 months of that year, my father had passed away, my business at the time had ended, my health was in a tailspin, and my marriage was on the rocks. And I actually remember a moment where I was sitting on the floor of my new post-marriage breakup condo in the bathroom, surrounded by tools, because I've always been a renovator, and this bathroom was going to be my latest project, And there were literally tears streaming down my face because the only thought in my mind was, it's me that needs renovating.
Ooh.
And it was one of those really beautiful moments, because as painful as it was at the time, it was the moment I realized that all the outwards trappings of success, all the techniques you could learn, all of those things only go so far. And until you really start doing your inner work, as a leader, you're never really going to get to those places where people consider you an exquisite leader, where you're a massive contribution to the planet. And it's that inward journey, I think, that for most leaders is the most important.
Yeah. Oh, wow. First of all, that's just, beautiful. I actually got chills as I heard you talk about that needing a renovation for yourself. And so I'm curious, because I know we've had some similar journeys, being in the corporate thing and then having everything kind of fall apart all at the same time. Sort of those seems to be the symptom of high achieving type A personalities, who the only way we stop is when everything falls apart at the same time. And so what I'm really curious,
handbasket moments.
oh,
Right?
the hell in a handbasket, right? Yeah, my mom
Yeah.
says, like, you sound like an 80-year-old woman when you say that. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's an expression that works.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that, what I really want to delve into a little bit, is you talked about leadership being messy. And I love that there's already a vulnerability in that. There's already a space that says, and my eyes are already starting to water, because leadership is messy. And there's this moment where you're sitting on your bathroom floor realizing that the work that needs to be done or gets to be done, the opportunity, right, is on yourself. And everything around you seems as if it's just fallen apart in some aspects. How did you step into that space of courage? Because for a lot of people, that's crippling fear. That's a crippling moment that says, oh my God, I'm out, game over, peace out, I can't do this. So what was it in you that allowed you to step forward, to face those fears and really stand in a place to have that courage to start to sort of unravel the messiness of the journey that got you where you are now?
Wow, I love that question. You know, one of the reasons I think I wrote Mass Influence was because I wanted good people, everyday heroes, you know, to realize that stepping into influence and leadership is not only important, but it's a lot simpler than we might think. And the biggest thing in most people's way is their inner dialogue. For me, I think it was that moment was such a gift, because I was at such rock bottom. You know, I was so starkly realizing that all the outward trappings of success in my life, like I had the beautiful 6-figure income, that nice house, the great car, 2 kids. Anyone might have outwardly looked at me and said, she's got it all, look at her, you know. And I really had to face up to, then why am I so frickin' unhappy? You know? And I think a lot of leaders and a lot of people that just want to create change in the world, that want to make a difference in the world, have moments like this. And usually for a lot of people, when you talk to them, there's at some point a big one where it's like, is this all there is? That's really what we start asking. Is this all there is? And the gift of those moments is when you're at such rock bottom, the only thing to do is go up, right? And you've got 2 choices in those moments. You can go out and blame the world for your situation, or you can really look head on at, you know, every mess I'm in, I'm the common denominator. Every mess I'm in, I'm the common denominator. And so I need a different me to be a better leader. And because leadership is messy, right? Leadership is freaking messy by the very nature of what leadership is. Leadership is figuring out what to do and then enrolling a group of people in following. That's really what leadership is. And so the very nature by definition of what leadership is there's no one else to show you how to do it. You're figuring it out. And figuring it out is a messy state of action, right? So the only thing you can do is work on yourself as a leader so that when those challenges come up, you're ready to be the person other people need you to be.
Wow. So powerful. And I think, you know, the fact that you take so much responsibility for that acknowledgement of, look, the common denominator, there's one common denominator. And there's so many times that we use that as a cop-out, or we use that as a projection to say, yeah, but that was done to me. Yeah, that happened. And it's when you get really clear, because you're right, what goes down eventually has to come up. And it's that space to realize that we all have that responsibility to figure out, there's a common denominator, and it starts with the person looking back at me in the mirror. And so there's 2 words that you use that I know that in all senses of the word, people are like, oh, I get that. I get that. But I think it's important sometimes as leaders and as we move forward to redefine some of those words that might be those kind of buzzword bingo words that we all just kind of throw out. One of them is happiness, and one of them is influence. And I think the fact that those are such powerful words, yet they're so easy for us to just pass and say, yeah, I get what happy is. Do we? And influence. And so I'd love for you to take a moment to define or share your definition of what happiness really is for you, and what does it mean to really have influence?
Well, brilliant questions. I always think the best leaders ask the best questions. So that's a reflection.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You know, happiness, we all know what it is, right? It's that state where we feel elated, the state of joy. And at the same time, I've done a lot of delving into the whole notion of what true happiness and what lasting happiness is. And go figure, Aristotle was one of the earliest writers on the state of happiness. And he wrote about the distinctions between hedonistic happiness, which is the happiness that comes from the pursuits of the flesh. You know, we have our favorite latte in our Canada mug. You know, I got a little Canada sign here, right? And, or, you know, those moments where we eat that really good dish that's our absolute favorite. You know, for me, it's pumpkin pie. And that is real happiness, but it's not lasting happiness. As soon as the experience of that thing is gone, the hedony of the moment is gone, the happiness is gone. And Aristotle also talked about that there is a different form of happiness. He called it eudaimonia, or eudaimonistic pleasures. And that's the happiness that comes from knowing that you are a deep contribution to your community or society as a whole. And he spoke about that as a much more lasting happiness. It's the happiness of contribution. And I love it. There's been a lot of research in the last 100 years around the whole notion of happiness, but I love that the conversation started thousands of years ago with one of our earliest philosophers, because what a lot of people find is, if you really want lasting happiness in your life, you need to decide who you are in the world and what your life is about. And when you get to that place where you really choose to be a deep contribution to your family, to your community, to the world as a whole, that's when happiness starts to settle about you and become part of your very cells. You know, and so one of the reasons I got so excited about helping other people learn about influence was because influence helps people in that whole journey of becoming a lasting contribution to the world. Influence is the tool of making change in the world. It is the tool of being a contribution in the world, right? Because you wanted a definition of influence. Influence is just, do people know, like, and trust you well enough that they take action based on your word? Mm-hmm. And therefore, mass influence is simply, do a lot of people know, like, and trust you well enough that they would take action based on their word, right? And so influence is really the engine that drives change. Isn't that funny? And, you know, it's something that we all need, and many of us have.
Wow. I have to say, when I asked you that question, I had no idea where this was going to go. And I love
I didn't either.
I love where you took this for so many reasons. One, because it is the only way. And I think that space around, you know, tapping back into those definitions that Aristotle shared. Wow, what powerful, because we do have sort of that instant gratification, or that more, you know, space that's the tangible kind of things we sense with our, you know, various senses and feel. And then there's that really inner knowing of who we are and how we get to show up and serve in the world, which is how I define leadership, right? It's that how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take personal responsibility. So and then you realize your ability to create that, do people know, like, trust, respect you, as a way of really knowing who you are? Because the only way that happens is when you stand confidently in who you are and you open that up and invite other people in. Right. And so I love, because you touched on the space around that happiness stems from that community of people that you're inviting in that space. And you are all about community, Miss Teresa. You put community out in such big, powerful ways that, I mean, as a change agent and catalyst to really show what mass influence can do, it's part of why you started the Evolutionary Business Council, which I am so honored to get to play in and be part of. It has absolutely been a game changer and life changer with the people that I've got to build relationship with. Tell me about how that community, how the sense of community has really opened up a bigger space for you to step forward, and what that's meant for your own happiness, and what that's meant for you personally as a leader who I've also watched grow. Even though you're phenomenal, you continue to grow in your own game.
Well, I love that you raised that, because, you know, the Evolutionary Business Council has been one of the funnest, most rewarding, and messiest things I've ever done, you know, and not to mention one of the most terrifying, you know, because there was a time in my life, you know, and when I talk about the seeds of how the Evolutionary Business Council was born, it was actually born on intervention, believe it or not. I had done a big event in Calgary. I invited a bunch of my favorite big name speakers to come and join, people that I really adored and loved. And as a treat, I decided to rent a condo up in the mountains west of Calgary in Canmore. And I took everybody up to the mountains for the weekend. I just thought we could mastermind together. All the speakers were together. And we were sitting around that night after the event had closed, and out of my mouth pops the sentence, someday when I'm influential enough, I'd love to start a community of thought leaders and emerging thought leaders who really support each other in creating change in the world and really help them in the influence game. And everyone in the room starts laughing. And I'm looking around the room like, why are they laughing at that? It's my dream, like you're all laughing at my dream. And my inner dialogue's really flaring up in that moment. Like, what's wrong with my dream? Why are they all laughing at me?
Right.
And Daniel Gutierrez looks at me, who some of you may know is one of the top Latino speakers in the world. And he says, Teresa, weren't you on stage 5 hours ago telling people to notice when they say someday I will? And to notice what's inner dialogue is in the way of you doing it now. And then Jennifer Huff looks at me. Of course, she's one of the top empowerment speakers in the world. And she's just got the biggest Cheshire grin on her face. And she says, so when are you going to do that, Teresa? And I got the joke in that moment. And that was the moment the EBC was born. In fact, all the people sitting around that room became the first board of directors of the EBC. And it was messy, because talk about your inner dialogue flaring up. Here I'm creating a community of some of the most incredible leaders of the world, some great change agents, people who really want to make a difference in their communities and their conversations. Like, who could ever be big enough to lead something like that, right? And the irony is, it's such a group of amazing people that the EBC almost runs itself. There's no mistake I could make that there aren't a dozen people like you there to help me pick up the drop ball, and forgive me that it's messy, So I think sometimes the things that are most worth doing in life are the messiest, and we love them because they are.
Yeah. Well, and what's so great about that is when you think about, we all have that inner dialogue. Oh my goodness, I have the monkey mind that goes crazy sometimes, and my inner child is like rearing its head. And we play, and it's interesting because recently we've been having this whole conversation around changing our what if to an imagine if, right? And so that someday language is another version of what if. Because as soon as we say someday I will, we allow all those, what if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if I'm not big enough? What if I'm not worthy? What if I'm whatever else story script crazy language starts coming in our head. And I'm sure you can attest to this. The bigger we play, the louder the inner chatter gets sometimes in the dialogue, that we need that community around us to remind us of how to step forward. And so I'm curious, because that's a really good example of stepping forward into from the what if space of someday I might, perhaps if I were worthy enough, what if this, what if that, into a holy cow, this is really mine to embrace. Imagine if. And so you had that courage to step forward, which I love. So as you keep moving through those opportunities, and I know that bigger things keep showing up on your plate. I mean, you're a rock star, and you're creating this mass influence on such a global, profound scale. And the EBC keeps growing along with all these other things that you put your fingers into, right? So what is that next space that you're starting to dance with that says, when I think about imagine if, where's the vision? Where is the big space for Teresa to even like explode and show up even more than what you're doing now?
Yeah, I love that. I know why I'm such a huge fan of your work, Candy Barone. That's a beautiful way to talk about conquering your inner dialogue, moving into imagine if. One of the reasons I wrote Mass Influence is that research now shows most good people have their inner dialogue flare up the most when they think about going into positions of leadership or influence, when they think about really standing in their dream. And I don't mean their dream of having more things, but their true dream at their heart of really being a contribution to the world. Because most people have a really deep-seated dream of really contributing to the world in some day. And our own inner dialogue is always our biggest enemy in that realm, right? Because our dreams are scariest to us than they are to anyone else, right? Because they're your dreams. That's cute, right? So I love that. And, around the question of what's next, it's interesting. I couldn't have dreamed what the EBC would become. In fact, often the EBC stands me in what my dreams are. And 2 or 3 years ago, many of the senior leaders were, again, a lot of what the EBC is we just get people together in social gatherings and we dream together. And some of the senior members were sitting around saying, imagine if people in the world were on top of their inner dialogue. And imagine if people in the world really felt free to step into their big what if. And we all started really getting goosebumps, because that's where we're talking about not just teaching the world, but transforming the world. And the common element of EBC members is they're all people who teach and who stand in teaching transformational principles, right? Not just I'm going to teach you a new skill, but when you get on top of that inner dialogue that trips you up, what would your life be like then? Like, who might you be? Imagine if you were someone that wasn't stopping yourself all of the time from your own inner fear, right? And so out of that conversation, the EBC created its big, hairy, audacious goal that transformational principles would reach 1.2 billion people by the year 2020 by helping 1,200 leaders each reach 1 million people in transformational teachings. And these are just regular, everyday speakers and trainers who are teaching the notion of how do we get on top of our inner dialogue. But we stood in, what if we could be the tipping point of planet Earth transforming and getting on top of its inner dialogue collectively as humanity? What would the world look like then? And so we created that goal. And that's the EBC standing in the outrageous notion that we could be the tipping point for planet Earth.
Imagine if every time, and I've heard this since I've been a part of EBC and the Evolutionary Business Council, and every time I get the goosebumps and I get the delicious chills down my body, because I think about that fact of what it takes to create that tipping point. And I think people think that that's so unavailable to them when, not everybody plays on a global scale like we do. Not everybody wants to be out there creating transformation across the globe, but the power of creating transformation in your home, in your community, and what that tipping point might look like in your own backyard. I think that whole imagine if, and so I'm curious I love this. I love the more we dance in this space, the more this imagine if just starts to open up. What really delights you most as you think about that day when the tipping point happens? Not if, when that day happens, when that tipping point and that transformational conversation, that transformational space of how people are choosing to show up. And, the people that are sometimes the late adopters that sit back and watch, they're starting to slowly come over into the camp to say, yeah, me too. What delights you most about that as you start to really put yourself in the moment? Imagine if it's as if it's happening right now. Tell me what that experience is like for you.
I am someone who deeply appreciates the exquisite beauty of simplicity. And so for me, that moment looks like a group of us sitting here at the community we're building in Costa Rica, Vista Mundo, which is a gathering of leaders who believe in causing transformation. And sitting around with our chai lattes in the morning, talking about how easy and downstream it was to create this. Because I think a lot of us think that things have to be done in big, grandiose ways, and I love that Margaret Mead quote. I'm probably going to mess it up, but, never underestimate the power of a few dedicated individuals to cause change in the world, because for indeed, that's all that ever has. I think that's one of the most brilliant quotes out there, that often change happens while the government is doing other things. Often change happens at a very grassroots level, and then the government several years later catches up to the fact that the change has already taken place. There's massive change happening on this planet right now, the ability of people to communicate worldwide. Businesses are now hiring people from all over the world. Companies like Upwork and Elance have created this ability for people to work everywhere. We're now in a scenario where borders are becoming meaningless. The governments just haven't figured that out yet. But the average information worker especially can now travel and work from anywhere in the world. Our economy is starting to flatten. There's all kinds of change and shift happening. And all of it is happening at a grassroots level. When you look at things like cryptocurrency was created with a couple guys and a computer and an idea over coffee one night, and it was an idea to change the world. That what if we took the control of money and put it in the hands of regular people, and took it out of the control of faceless governments that don't necessarily, where it has to go through too many chains and the money eventually whittles away by the time it goes from point A to point B. What if we just simplified the way we live on this world? And a lot of those grassroots initiatives happen in such simple and downstream ways that nobody even notices that they're happening. It just really takes a few courageous individuals to say, as you would say, imagine if, which is just a miraculous phrase.
Well, and it's so people forget that we all create that ripple effect, right? It's that space of, and, to quote one of my favorites, Maya Angelou, who says, people won't remember what you said. They won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And what we don't realize is even our listeners right now, even the audience, they're taking away something from this conversation, which then they choose to put into their life and serve it forward or lead it forward. And so it's that ripple effect that we all have the opportunity to step into. And I think it's so powerful when you talk about changes happening all around us. We get to, by being at that grassroots level, every day decide how we want to show up and offer our own living legacy, which is that way that we interact and engage with humans in every single moment. We have an opportunity to be that catalyst. And so I think it's so beautiful that you talk about that. And, I'm watching our time a little bit and already going, I'm going to have you come back, Teresa. We could dance on this forever. But before we even get into kind of bringing things full circle, and before I forget, I want you to share with people how they can reach out to you. How can they connect with you? Because I know there's people out there right now listening that are like, this woman is absolutely fantastic. She's amazing. I want to keep following what she's doing. I want to interact with her more. And let me tell you, you do. Even if you're like, I'm telling you, you do. She's fantastic. She's incredible. She's one of the most impactful, influential people in my life, which is why it's such an honor to have you here. But how can people get a hold of you, Teresa?
Well, I'd love to have you start with just doing the 30-day influence challenge. So if you're watching this, I have a simple 30-day program that we give out complimentary. That's 30 days of just building your muscle and understanding what influence really is, and understanding how influence works and how influential relationships are built. It's just 2 little 2-minute exercises you do every day for 30 days. When you sign up for that program, we also send you to all the links where you can get a free digital version of my book, Mass Influence. I'm just going to hold it up. Mass Influence.
It's an awesome book. You can see mine. Mine has like 27,000 tabs because I keep going back. That book has been, I should have brought mine over here. Mine is very used.
It's, and it's really the book to help everyday good people really understand not only how to access their own influence and their own leadership, but their own lasting happiness from being a contribution, right? So you can go to massinfluencethebook.com and sign up for the 30-day influence challenge, and there we'll send you to everywhere if you want to get a free digital version of the book. You can also access all the printed versions there as well if you need to. And I'd really love to connect with you. So come do the program and we'll move on from there.
Yeah. And let me tell you, as someone who has done both, I have done both her 30-day program, which is fantastic. And it's a powerful 2 minutes. People think, 2 minutes. That's really, when you are deliberate about your messaging and what you're filling activity, there's a lot you can do in 2 to 5 minutes. Trust me. And you have that time every morning. So invest in yourself to do that. It's only your time. And I will tell you that book is really, it's on my shelf as one of my constant go-tos. It has been tabbed. It really was just a brilliant example of not only how Teresa steps forward to lead, but also just really bringing influence down to a very simple level so that we all can play a game that lets us show up as a leader more. And Teresa, I am so just thrilled to have you here. And, you know, as we are kind of closing things out for the day, I mean, one, just immense gratitude for who you are, how you show up, and the invitation you made to me to play in space with you. I will never forget that day when when we connected, and it has forever changed my life. But I'm curious, as we kind of close out this conversation, which has just been so just wonderful. What's a takeaway or something that you would like to share as kind of your final statement or thought for this morning? Because again, I would love to have you come back and play with us again. But what would you like to leave? What would you like to say to this audience? You know, to kind of summarize our conversation.
You know, give yourself permission to fail, because leadership is messy. In fact, give yourself permission to fail spectacularly, because until you have permission to make mistakes, you'll never give yourself permission to create that imagine if. You know, I love the quote, impossibility cannot stand in the face of possibility. So create some outrageous possibilities in your life and give yourself permission to fail at them, because life is a whole lot juicier at the other side, and the world is waiting for you. The world is waiting for you to step up.
Wow, I absolutely love that. Impossibility cannot stand in the place of possibility. How amazing and fantastic is that? And so truly imagine the possibilities that are ahead of you. And you do have to get into that space that's messy and uncomfortable and have that courage and step forward and know that you are worth it, because it really is about understanding the fact that leadership is how you choose to show up. Leadership is how you choose to serve others. And leadership is you taking that choosing to take that personal responsibility inside those two spaces. And that means allowing yourself that permission to step forward and play Imagine If. So Teresa, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, my soul, my toes, my whole world, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, your insight, your wisdom. Thank you for being such an incredible just light and mentor and friend to me. You really have had a profound impact and influence on my life, and I will forever be grateful for how the stars aligned. So thank you for being here with us.
It was my pleasure, and thank you, Candy. I so appreciate who you are in the world.
Awesome. With that, everyone, make it a phenomenal day. Go out and say yes to yourself, destroy the noise, and know that you have the opportunity to go big, to grow big. This is Candy. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes with our amazing, powerful thought leaders like Teresa, who joined us today. Go out and make your difference. I will talk to you all soon. Bye.